G'day everyone. I thought I would bring you an update on the Anglo Saxon and biking project. What you can see in front of you are some footsore miniatures Anglo Saxon Bowmen, and behind them are 4 spearmen, levy spearmen. So they are all metal 28mm miniatures. The spearmen have Little Big Men Studio shield decals, and the miniatures all have tufts from Leadbear's tufts made here in Australia. Following on from my last video, I thought I would follow up again with some history, this time concerning the use of bowmen in this period, what we call the early medieval period, before the rise of the English longbow to sort of its preeminence in medieval English armies, when the Anglo-Saxons' use of bowmen was somewhat different than what we see in later centuries. I'm going to read from you today from an excellent volume called The English Warrior from Earliest Times till 1066 by Stephen Pollington, who specialises in the history of this period in question. So I'm going to go to, he has a section on the use of the bow in the Anglo-Saxon warfare, and just going to read a couple of pages, and I hope it's of some interest. Sometimes what we use or can tend to use on a war games table may not always reflect what really happened, and sometimes we just don't have enough information. Okay, let's start. English bows of the Anglo-Saxon period were of the longbow type, even though they were seemingly only drawn to the chest, not the ear, as for the classic medieval English and Welsh longbow. One find from Chesil Down was 5 foot long, or 152 centimetres, shorter than the Oberfläche maximum of 7 foot, or 2.1 metres, but a powerful weapon nonetheless. The bows on the Bayeux tapestry seem to be about 49 inches long, 1.25 metres long, but detailed inferences based solely on that work's evidence should not be made. The range of the bow depends more on the strength and skill of the bowman than the tensile strength of the weapon itself. Assuming that men accustomed to hunting could... I'm going to have to pause because the phone's ringing. It's probably a call centre. Hang on a sec. And we're back. Okay, so talking about how it depends on the strength and skill of the bowman. Assuming that men accustomed to hunting would be reasonably proficient in its use, a range of between 285 and 600 yards, or 260 and 550 metres, has been proposed, although F.M. Stenton was inclined to put it at no more than 100 yards, or 90 metres. The Beowulf poet knew of the bow and arrow as a weapon of the chase, and described a hunting accident whereby a youngster caused the death of his elder brother. For the eldest unfittingly was the bed of death laid out by his kinsman's deeds. Once from his horn bow Hethkin killed him with an arrow, his noble loved one. He missed his mark and shot down his kinsman, his own brother, with a bloody shaft. The hornboger, or hornbow, may be a composite bow of wood and horn, if it is not just a poetic way of expressing the weapon's curvature. Later in the poem, the warrior Wiglaf describes his dead lord as the folk prepare his funeral pyre, in terms of the battles he has survived, in a quite detailed account of the effects of archery in war. Now the embers shall devour, the bright flame grow, the warrior's strong man, who often endured the iron shower, when the storm of darts powered by strings sped across the shield wall. The shaft held to its task, keen in its feathered flights, it followed the barb. There is, though, little direct descriptive evidence to suggest that the English used the bow in war on any but the smallest scale, other than the few references in the Battle of Maldon poem to the two sides harming each other only through arrows' flight. And in the initial stages, bows were busy, while towards the end, Eskforth's contribution was that he sent many arrows speeding forth. Sometimes he struck a shield, sometimes wounded a warrior. Furthermore, as Nicholas Brooks has suggested, if Wulfmare could pick up and throw back a spear, there is no reason to think that bowmen would be unable to shoot back the other side's arrows. The nebulous nature of the archaeological evidence has been used to support the idea that the English did not use bows in war. Weapons and war gear are very common in pagan period male inhumation burials, but bows are extremely rare. Therefore, the argument runs, bows cannot have been weapons. This line of reasoning would have more force if we could be sure that every possible find of a bow had actually been identified as such. In post-Norman conquest times, we have the surprising statement of Henry of Huntingdon that the English did not know the use of archery in war. Yet there is some evidence to show that the bow was a popular hunting weapon which was simply not considered sufficiently noble as an instrument of warfare. On the 7th century Frank's casket lid, the warrior named in runes Agili is depicted shooting at an attacking force from the window of his house, one man having been felled by an arrow in the chest, while the foremost of the advancing assailants has two stuck in his shield, with a third about to strike his helmet. Eagle, in common with other Anglo Saxon illustrated bowmen, does not have a quiver, but seems to have one further arrow propped against the windowsill ready for use, while a woman seated behind him is apparently making more. Yet these circumstances are clearly not those of normal warfare. The bow-wielding warrior is being attacked in his house and having to improvise with the weapons he has to hand. Elsewhere, and at the other end of the period, the Bayeux tapestry clearly shows an archer among the English troops. Though he is in something of a minority, surrounded by the armoured sword, axe and spear-wielding warriors of the English shield wall, and significantly he seems to be only chest-high to the regular infantrymen around him. Many of the English soldiers there have shields with numerous arrows sticking out of them, and the Norman archers are shown operating in conjunction with their cavalry, giving covering missile attacks while the horsemen advance. One even appears on horseback chasing the routed English. If bowmen were not frontline troops in the Anglo-Saxon military hierarchy, it may be that their role was rather with the other non-combatants in protecting the wagons and pack horses than in offensive action. Again, if the bowmen were of lowly status, and they need not always have been, as the archer in the Battle of Maldon was clearly of enough importance to be a hostage, it could be argued that they were left behind by the main army and were only expected to play the part of snipers and skirmishers, harassing the enemy without engaging him in a straight fight. Brooks remarks that the archery at Maldon was such as to wound the foe without apparently being deadly in its effect. It would be instructive to know the source of a later addition to Manuscript C of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle describing events at Stamford Bridge, where Harold's English army took on the forces of his brother Tostig and the Norwegian adventurer Harald Hardrada. Describing the Norse king's defeat and the rout of his army, the manuscript says, "And the Northmen fled from the English. Then one of the Norwegians was there who withstood the English army, so that it could not cross over the bridge nor gain victory. Then one Englishman shot with an arrow, but it achieved nothing. And then under the bridge came another one, and pierced him beneath the byrnie. Then Harold, king of the English, came over the bridge with his army onwards with him, and made a great slaughter there of Norwegians and of Flemings. And the king's son Edmund allowed Harold to proceed home to Norway with all the ships." Unfortunately, the handwriting and language in which this addition is made dates from the 1200s, and consequently the description of events may be a later embroidering of some minor incident. Nevertheless, the implication is clearly that the English archer shooting from a distance could do nothing to dislodge the Norwegian on the bridge, and that only the quick thinking of another man saved the day. It is not clear whether this man who felled the Viking did so by stabbing him or possibly shooting him at close range and from a place of concealment beneath the bridge, or as thurustung, or through pierced, can bear either sense. The bow, then, was never the first choice of weapon of the English professional warrior, and seems probably to have been largely reserved for hunting. The lower orders, however, may perforce have had to use it when summoned to war, due to its relative cheapness and the fact that such men already had a bow for hunting. Bows are not the weapons of heroes in Germanic tradition, who generally prefer to slog it out with spear and sword. They are not prestigious, decorated mathams handed on with pride from father to son. They are just cheap, crude staves with a length of string attached. And I'll leave it there. Take what you will from that, but it does seem that though there may have been bows in use by the English, perhaps not to the extent that the Normans used them, or maybe the Vikings used them, and they certainly weren't necessarily held in high regard, more as a useful hunting weapon and a last resort weapon. As we heard there, their effectiveness was not always reliable, and especially when you could fend a lot of them off with shield and turn them with your mail and things like that. So yeah, and yet often we do see swarms of them in war games. But hey, we weren't there, as I like to say, and I think it's true of so much in history. I wasn't there. So we can only know a certain amount from what we find in the ground or find in textual evidence and that sort of thing. All right, guys, I hope that was of some interest, and I'm not sure how long it'll be before my next video. There's a lot of things happening here at the moment. I will not go into them, but they aren't all fun, that's for sure. All right, guys, all the best and take care of yourselves. Bye for now.